Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome back to our channel once again. I've always opined on this platform on many occasions that in politics nothing happens out of mere coincidence, and that everything in politics is normally well planned, well scripted and executed to achieve a specific political objective. Nothing just happens for the sake of it. Yesterday but one, the Deputy Inspector General of Police, Eliud Lagat, stepped aside from his position to allow for investigations into the murder of Albert Ojwang. I want to ask you a simple question. Why do you think Eliud Lagat decided to step aside? Because there's a very big difference between resigning, what Kenyans were calling for, stepping aside, and being suspended or interdicted.
Ningeomba kama mzazi, ikiwa Wakenya pia wananisikia, huyu bwana Lagat angewekwa ndani, aingizwe ndani korokoroni, kama vile nasikia wale wenzake maafisa wa polisi walivyoingizwa ndani korokoroni. Kwa sababu nchi yetu ya Kenya ni nchi ambayo inaongozwa na sheria. Hakuna ambaye yuko juu ya sheria. Na ikiwa kuna uchunguzi unafanywa, kwa nini mwingine awe ofisini na yeye ndio mshukiwa kesi ambayo inahusu kijana aliyeuawa kinyama inamgusa na ametajwa? Mbali na yeye, hata wale maaskari waliomchukua katika mahojiano wanaweza kusaidia, lakini hawezi kusaidia ikiwa wao wako ofisini, wako huru. Wanaweza kudhoofisha uchunguzi. Kwa nini wawe ofisini? Kwa nini waachiliwe?
Because remember, immediately the death of Albert Ojwang came and Kenyans started making noise about it. The National Police Service made the first step. And the first step was to interdict, were they 4 or 5 officers? I think there were 3 from service. That included Makwiny and it also included the OCS Talam. The DIG Langat was spared. Again, Kenyans were demanding for his resignation. But what happened? He decided to step aside. Stepping aside simply means living for someone temporarily. And you can do that voluntarily. Resignation means giving up permanently. And of course, the National Police Service, who is the employer, can also suspend Lagat. But here, we are in a situation where Lagat himself decided to step aside. In law, that action has no consequences. Because remember, Lagat is a prime suspect. Let me just read for you a statement, part of the statement which was part of the statement by one of the suspects, Makwiny. This is what Makwiny was quoted to have said. The OCS called me. Makwiny, there is a directive from DIG Langat. Do you know him? I replied, yes. There is a suspect being brought in. Take these 2,000 and organize some inmates to discipline him. Orders from above. So I agreed. Of course, Makwiny is in a very big problem. There is no way you can just receive instructions like that. The OCS through this is implicated. And importantly, Lagat is also implicated. But for over 1 week, Lagat never stepped aside.
Unataka kuambia William Ruto, huyu mtu yako anaitwa Lagat, akamatwe, aende kotini, ashitakiwe na kifo. Ni madharau si madharau? Sasa kijana ameuawa pale Nairobi, anaitwa Ojwang. Ameuawa na Deputy Inspector General of Police, anaitwa Lagat. Si ndio? Na huyo ni mtu ya Ruto na Murkomen. There is a squad, a killer squad of 101 officers ambayo walitoka AP wakaingizwa katika National Intelligence Service. Hao ndio wamefanya kazi ya abduction na kuua Gen Z. William Ruto sasa amechukua huyu Lagat, amemfanya komanda ya hiyo kikosi. Ndio huyu mtu anaitwa Ojwang amewekwa Central Police Station. Huyu Lagat ametuma watu wameenda pale wameua yeye.
In fact, the first press conference, he was right in the middle there, listening.
The reasons as to why the late Ojwang was arrested, together with a few others, is because there was a complaint that had been launched by the DIG KPS about his name being tarnished.
But because in politics nothing happens out of mere coincidence, in this video I want to reveal to you guys the dark secrets why Langat is going nowhere. Before you do that, for those who are watching this channel for the first time, please take a second or two, click the subscribe button so that next time we produce a video like this, YouTube will automatically notify you. And to the subscribers, I want to continue thanking you guys for your continued support. Because without that support, this channel cannot be where it is. Ladies and gentlemen, let us dive in. And I want to go straight to my first point. Why do you think this guy decided to step aside? Number one, it could be a strategy for him to make a comeback into the police force. Let's face the reality. The reality is that Langat was actually destined to succeed the Inspector General of Police, Douglas Kanja. But with all these new developments, he can't replace Kanja, if you are to ask me. But he can be transferred to another position where he will still be able to call shots. That's why he never resigned. He simply stepped aside. I want you to go back to all this thing, the way it started and how it's unfolding. As we speak, there are police officers who've been interdicted. There are police officers who've been arrested, like the OCS. There are police officers who've been charged. And there are also those police officers who are being investigated. For the case of Langat, where does he fall? He's never been charged. He's never been arrested. He's never written a statement. I'm told he's likely to write a statement today. The moment he will be charged, that will be the end of story. But even the day he resigned, and even the day he stepped down, it was as a result of persuasion. I'm told the president was there and others, and he was being persuaded to resign. Why? So why do you think he's not being charged? So that's number one, strategy to make a comeback. Number two, I think the idea of stepping aside was as a result of the pressure from Kenyans, trying to calm the nerves of Kenyans. Because the Gen Zs had promised that they were going to demonstrate yesterday, which they did. But remember, this guy was still adamant until very late in the evening, when these guys had already made their minds that we are going to the street for one purpose, to force the DIG to resign. So I think the resignation was not about any other thing. Because let me ask you, and this is something I was telling someone, that if I were President Ruto, this is how I would have managed this whole situation. This death, which is unfortunate, but of course the people who are being mentioned, and they are from my tribe, and I'm also being accused of running a killer squad. So what do I do? If I were Ruto, the first thing I would have done, immediately the name of DIG was mentioned, the first thing I would have done is to ask him to step aside. Then after stepping aside, promised Kenyans that no stone will be left unturned. But now we are in a situation where that did not happen. The guy continued as if nothing was happening in the Republic of Kenya. So that pressure is why he resigned. In fact, if there were no demonstrations yesterday, if those demonstrations were to happen, let's say tomorrow or next week, Langat would still be in office today. Number 3, I also tend to think that it could be part of a strategy to cover up for Langat. Because if Langat had resigned, he would not be able to access his office. He would not be able to dictate certain terms. But this guy has just stepped aside. Stepping aside means he's still a police officer, he's still the DIG. He can still do whatever he can. In fact, I even suspect he can still be operating and calling shots from whichever location he may want to operate from. And lastly, Ruto has plans for Langat. Rigathi has told us this on many occasions. And I also believe now that Langat is going to play a major role in the management of the 2027 presidential elections. Already Rigathi is telling us that he's managing a unit. That unit is specifically for people like Albert Ojwang, who are writing bad things in quotes against the government. And there are many. I was going through some posts and someone made some very interesting comment that in Githurai and Kahawa, a lot of youths disappeared during the Gen Z protest, and that the squad which made those disappearances made them to an extent that no evidence was left. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what you think, but for me, the idea of Langat choosing to step aside has no consequence, and therefore there are certain objectives it will achieve. Until next time, this is Makwiny. Bye-bye.